There are three types of engine placements in the cars of Assetto Corsa Competizione. You have a front engine car, a mid-engine car, and a rear engine car. Now, why in the world would you ever put a massive engine in the back of a race car? Watch this video and find out. To fully understand the engine placements of the cars in Assetto Corsa Competizione, but maybe this will be applicable to different simulators as well, a lot of people say if you're a beginner, you should pick a front engine car. How do I know if it's a front engine car? Well, look at the design. If it has a large hood or a big bonnet, then it's probably gonna have the engine in the front. And it doesn't even mean that the extensive long hood is actually the whole engine. They probably want to place that front engine rearward as much as possible to get the weight on the different tires onto like a 50-50 ratio. Now probably it will be like 60-40 for front engine cars. Whenever we're cornering and we go through a corner, the front engine weight on the front of the car will pull the car out of the corner, pulling it from the front through the center of mass, pulling it to the outside. This creates that understeer we're people talking about. Another effect is that the rear of the car is slightly less heavy, so whenever we make aggressive direction changes, the rear end will not have a lot of momentum to pull the car into very dangerous oversteer situations. This is the reason why it's so safe to drive. Now, because we don't have that much weight on the back, it is also a little bit slower on acceleration out of slow corners because we pretty much don't have the traction when we hit throttle. One thing I really like about this is that we can go on throttle earlier, and with the right differential setting, we can actually use the throttle to rotate out of corners a little bit, have a little bit of slip on the rear tires, so we can go on throttle that bit earlier than the other two engine placements. Now, the disadvantage is the front tires are going to be overloaded because when we are braking, we have a lot of weight on that front and we want to maybe trail brake. So whenever we stop trail braking, we're not overloading the front tires anymore. And this is like when we release brakes, the front gets really sensitive to its grip. If you want more details about this braking behavior on the tires and how it's overloading, I don't know, maybe leave a comment down below. So to summarize a front engine car, it's probably going to be easy to control. It's going to be a little bit longer braking distance, probably going to be like understeering nature, and we do have the effect of that we are not super hard acceleration out of slow corners. What about the mid-engine cars? The reason why a car manufacturer puts their engine in the middle to get the weight balance 50-50. So the front and the rear tires will have a 50-50 load on the tarmac when we are cornering. This allows the tires to work to its optimum potential. And there's probably some other reasons. I really could not find it, or people are not really speaking about it. And if I'm wrong, also tell me. But what I found is like you have more like a aerodynamic freedom on the front of the car because you don't have the burden of placing this car in front, and also have like the steering mechanism on the front. What I also really like about mid-engine cars, especially in VR, I have a lot like a way more clearer picture on the road surface ahead of me. And it also makes me kind of like really have more contact with the road with a mid-engine car. What I also found, and also I didn't really see any like data or whatever, but I feel a mid-engine car has a better aero balance than a front-engine car. Now, the downside for me for a mid-engine car is that because we have more weight on the back of the car, when we use harsh inputs, you have some sort of a run-up effect. And if you overdo it, then it's like skiing on a black piste. Once you go down, once you made a big mistake, let's say on a corner entry, and you start oversteering, it can be very difficult to save yourself in an oversteering situation. This is what I found with the mid-engine cars. They have some more downforce, they have more rotation, they are more effective on its tires when braking and accelerating compared to the front engine car. So in a way, it is less limited in the freedom what you do. By the way, do you want a 992 setup pack for a car that doesn't want to kill you every corner you enter? You want to check out my Patreon store. I built a special Porsche 992 pack for you to use to progress into different levels and high and low down for setup. Check them out down below. Now we get into the juicy stuff, the Honda drivers and the Porsche drivers, the weight on the back, the rear engine cars. Why in the world would a Porsche manufacturer put the rear engine? Why would they put an engine in the back of the car? I actually never understood this until I got into it and made a study of it. I watched a lot of videos, searched up a lot of content. And this is what I found. Whenever we are cornering and the car is going through the corner, we have actually a weight pulling the car from the back into oversteer. This can be offset with the rear wing. And then when we hit the brakes and turning into the corner, this weight is going to help us rotate into the corner. Now, I've seen quite a bit of comments with Porsche related topics that when people get used to this effect, they can never go back to a different car. Now, I have a very hard time in a 992 or a Honda, but I do know some changes to make the car more predictable and not make it such a murderer every time you are using harsh inputs. These effects are desirable for some and they are an absolute nightmare for others. But the biggest advantage of having a rear engine, it allows us to use a ridiculously low amount of rear brake bias. So whenever we're braking, the front wheels will have a certain amount of grip of weight transfer, but the rear tires are also gonna be still pretty much under a certain significant amount of load compared to a front or mid-engine car, so we can push the brake bias backwards and make the car stop a lot faster than the other cars. I don't really feel if it's that significant over the others, but I found that's the general idea of having a rear engine cars. Then when we release brakes and we have a certain inputs, we can find a lot of rotation because of the rear engine pulling us into the corner. And then when we're lining up for the perfect exit, when we hit throttle, we also have a massive amount of traction because not only through weight transfer the car is leaning backwards, pushing more rear load on the rear tires, we also have the weight from the rear engine on the rear tires, making us accelerate out of corners super fast compared to a front engine car. Now, the downside of this, or at least for me, because I have a hard time, I really feel like a lot of understeer when I try to rotate out of the corner with a Porsche. After this section, I'm going to explain a little bit about setups and how a front, mid or rear engine car, what effects, changes I'm using to manipulate that behavior and not make it so difficult. So to summarize a rear engine car, we have a shorter braking distance, we have more acceleration, and we have more rotation, and then the downside, it's gonna be more tricky to drive. So let's have a look on the front engine car, what I would do to get around the effects of that front engine making us understeer all the time, and what could be some ideas to get rid of that effect. And by the way, this is the Aston Martin. I built multiple level setups in the Patreon store. Go check them out. They are for different levels and different skill levels. So if you're just starting out, you just pick 1 and 2, and then when you challenge yourself, you want to progress into your sim racing career, you can pick these different levels. Let's just pick level 4 and explain a little bit aerodynamic stuff and like what you will find. And this is like the Aston Martin. Yeah, the Merc, you cannot do this. You can only go up to 75 and not higher. Front engine cars will have more ride height on the back. Yeah, pushing the aero balance more forward, getting rid of understeer. What is also a characteristic, what I'm using, what's really beneficial for me, I find that we have more bump stop ranges on the front, and this allows for more front grip tire efficiency. Then, when we're on throttle and we don't want oversteer out of corners, I find a lot of times that I'm using pretty low bump stop ranges. So this is only a little bit of movement. This meaning we overload the rear tires, so we rip them basically from grip to create the overall balance. And a lot of times I maybe run a little bit lower anti-roll bar and a little bit lower diff settings to get that nice rotation on throttle. That's really helping me out in this particular car, but this is also very handy for a BMW or a Bentley or a Mustang. Now, what about a Ferrari 296, the mid-engine, and the setup changes I would make to and to watch out for when you're changing setups and to manipulate car behavior. Aero balance is gonna be a lot of times more equal. Yeah, so let's say a Ferrari, this even putting the front up a little bit to not make the car bottom out so much, and let's say a Lamborghini could even be a bit more like this, but you will probably never see values like the Aston Martin. Yeah, it's gonna be way more neutral because the car is more neutral in a way. So this is what I found. Yeah, then this section as well, a lot of times I'm running a little bit higher wheel rates on the front. This will make sure the front tires will overload quicker, will lose its grip efficiently quicker, and therefore we get more efficiency on the back of the car and therefore have more stability. So if you think your mid-engine car is sliding all the time, then a few clicks of this wheel rate in the front can really help you. Now, obviously, this is not a setup guide or whatever, but a little bit of a lower front bump stop range is also going to help the car pitch a lot less, and therefore, we're also going to have more stability. What is an absolute difference between the front engine and mid-engine cars, I might run quite big bump stop ranges on the back. So when we go faster, the back of the car will push down more. This is creating traction on the back. This is creating, I'm not gonna say that it creates understeer, it's creating stability. Yeah, so have a look. Now what about this bad boy of a car, the 992? Let's have a look. First thing you're gonna notice is the brake bias. Go back to the previous video and see how brake bias is a lot higher. On the front engine car, like the Austin, the brake bias is something like this. This car is actually 43. I said in one video on the channel that I don't really believe in a low brake bias, but for a Porsche, I absolutely believe we should run a low brake bias. Anyway, just explaining the setup here a little bit. Same as for the mid-engine car, we're probably not going to have a lot of ride height differences, especially when we cannot rely on the rear wing. The rear wing setting of a Porsche, and probably also the Honda, is going to be massive. It's going to be super important. I found like if I want to run a low downforce setup with the Porsche, I mean, like this is going to be still manageable. This is going to be like dangerous. This is going to be super dangerous, and this is just a death trap. Yeah, and everything below it, you're going to get killed. at least I'm gonna get killed. I'm not like a super Porsche driver, but yeah, 6 or 7. Okay, so what I found with the setup screen over all the rest, same as for the front engine cars, I like to run a little bit of a low bump stop range on the back, so we have some rear tire overload when we're on throttle, and this removes a little bit of grip when we're exiting out of corners. So if you're really struggling with exit and you want rotation on exit, you can even lower this one. I've seen setups that go super low, and if you really want to add something to that as well, you can even push that anti-roll bar up and up and up. This will make, the anti-roll bar will make that outside wheel in a corner have even more overload. This creates a lot of rotation. Yeah, stiff rear end of the car. But when you go these settings, you're probably gonna have a lot higher wing as well, pushing the car down again. Yeah, when it's a little bit lower, maybe not go that far with a Porsche. Then, again, we have that super low brake bias, and this is gonna give us such an advantage in the braking zone and braking for rotation. Now, the front wheel rates, I like to run them pretty stiff, and like this is a setting that I would use. And then when I go through the stint and the tank empties in the front, I start increasing the brake bias a little bit, maybe up to 48, and that will give me the less rotation on the braking. I'm still not super sure what about the preload differential. A higher preload differential should make the coasting a little bit more forgiving, but if you want to drive this car perfectly, you're gonna either be on throttle or on the brakes. And if you're like coasting, you'll release the throttle and release the brakes, then you get in a difficult and horrible situation. So always touch the throttle, always touch the brake, like 1 or 2%, like minimalistic. Then again, front wheel rates are going to be, if you put them lower, then the ranges should be lower as well. So you could do this, but still I have to figure this out. Yeah, forgive me for not knowing fully. As for tow values, I like to run these tow values. I don't really think. Maybe a little bit in the positive will give you a bit more stability, but I really hadn't found any like good values here yet. Now obviously we're only touching the surface with the setup changes and the way the car drives and behaves. If you want a full depth on a front engine car and how to exploit them to the max, or the rear or the mid-engine cars, let me know in the comments. And the most important thing of this video is to remember that it's not like one is always faster than the other. They will have like their advantages on different tracks, but I certainly don't believe that anyone is like quicker as a default. Yeah, they all have its strengths and weaknesses. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. That would be really appreciated. And I also want to shout out to supporters of the channel, and I definitely want to shout out to the people who bought my setups on the Patreon store. The meter is already over, like already more than 200 people were purchasing these, and I want to thank you massively. And I also want to encourage you to hit me up in the Discord if you think there's something needs to be changed, or you're hitting a plateau there, or you don't fully understand, you have some issues that I would really like to know as well. Again, thank you for the support.